politics as usual. Welcome to Politics as Usual, Season 2, and we are back like we never left. I'm so happy to bring you guys back to our little show, and with so much going on in the world right now, we had to come back and talk about everything in politics from A to Z. So right now, the biggest thing going on in the world, Russia, Ukraine, World War III, maybe, who knows? So since we may be on the cusp of World War III, I brought an expert here to join Jay and I to talk about everything that's going on. He's an expert in politics, the geopolitical spectrum, and I'm so proud to introduce, he's a journalist, a podcast host, a writer, and one of the brightest political minds I know, and a good friend of our Marz Entertainment down in the D.E.N community. Cameron Cowan, brother, how are you doing today? Welcome to Politics.
Hi. Bum, 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 bum. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to the hype.
You most definitely can. So, guys, if you aren't familiar with Politics as Usual, I'm Marz, and
this is your girl, Jay.
And we go through politics from A to Z, going through the entire political spectrum. So, Cam, I am not 100% familiar with what's going on in Ukraine. You know, we all know it's a bad thing. We all know that we're in the cusp of war. This is the Cold War all over again. But give us a little bit of insight. What the hell is going on right now between Russia and Ukraine? For anyone that doesn't know, give us a little insight.
No, I absolutely. It's funny you should say that because "What the Hell is Going On" was the title of my first nonfiction book about politics. And there's a new edition coming out this year. Yes, exactly. Yes, summer 2022. So the story with Ukraine begins back in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. Crimea is a little peninsula in southern Ukraine, like east of Italy. Putin basically just said, hey, this is now Russia. And the Obama administration was like, okay, sure. And then they held a vote, a plebiscite, as we say in the business. And not surprising, it was not much of a stand-up because Crimea is Russian-speaking, ethnically Russian, and Putin knows how to stuff a ballot box. Fast forward several years, there was a Russian... The government in Ukraine has sort of lost out. Bearing in mind, Ukraine was once part of the Soviet Union. Before that, it was once part of the Russian Empire. It was conquered by Catherine the Great in the 18th century. And so after the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine becomes its own country, but the government has always been pretty Moscow aligned. Well, the Ukrainian people had a civil war with some local militias, and Yanukovych, who was the Russian-backed president, was out, and a new fellow came in whose name I don't remember at this moment, but he was more pro-Western, and Ukraine began the multi-year process to join the European Union with a memorandum of understanding in the normalization of trade relations. That did not make Putin happy because that would bring an EU member state right up to his borders. And Ukraine has also been trying their damnedest to get into NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which has been a defensive alliance whose main purpose has been to counter Russia in Europe. And that was true from 1940s to today. And so this all has been going on. And so late last year, Zelensky was elected and wanted to keep going, which is what he ran on and won with. He did not want Ukraine to join the European Union. He did not want Ukraine to join NATO. There had been promises in the Minsk Agreement in 1997 where Ukraine gave up its nukes in exchange for border security from the United States and Russia. And he had spent the last several months massing troops on the border of Ukraine in the hopes to get Ukraine to drop its ascension to the European Union and its ascension to NATO. And as we know, on February 24th, Russian troops invaded Ukraine from the north, the south, and the east. And since then, we have seen a lot of things happen. We've seen the Russian military not be terribly effective in the north and the east. They have done much better in the south. We have seen them run out of food, run out of gas, all sorts of things. But we've also seen Ukraine kind of fall apart as a country. We're talking 1.5 million refugees. We're talking tens of thousands of civilian Ukrainians dead. Russian troops have also suffered losses. In fact, they have lost more troops in this war than we did in the entire 20 years we were in Afghanistan. It has become a bit of a quagmire. That's easing now. The infamous 40-mile long convoy that's been stuck on the side of the road is moving and redeployed again. It looks like they are about to surround the capital, Kyiv. Kherson has already fallen. Mariupol is what will be left of Mariupol by the time the Russians are done shelling it, will soon fall as well. And so even though it's not proceeding on nearly the schedule that the Office of the General Staff in Moscow thought it would be, it is proceeding. And this, of course, now of the first land war in Europe in 90 years, has a little bit in terms of we have sanctions of EU and the United States against Russia. They've closed Starbucks, McDonald's, banks are pulling out. The only thing leaving Russia right now is oil and gas. The United States has banned that. Europe is trying to figure out how to get off Russian gas, which is not an easy thing for them to do, especially Germany, because they closed all their nuclear power plants prematurely and unnecessarily, and all this sort of thing. And so now we have this situation where we have an active war going on in Europe, and we're now kind of trying to figure out what the next steps are. Ukrainians would like a no-fly zone over their country to get rid of the Russian Air Force, but the reality of that situation is a no-fly zone would quickly spiral into World War III. And that's probably the most frightening thing right now, is that there are many, many pathways for this conflict to expand. There are many, many pathways for World War III to start, and it only takes the wrong bullet going the wrong direction, the wrong missile hitting the wrong set of troops in the wrong country for this conflict to expand. The conflict is already expanding into include Belarus, and that's the last non-NATO country bordering Ukraine that Putin could either ally or attack without triggering NATO's Article 5 provision. And so we're now in a situation where we have very dicey times ahead. I've had a lot of people ask me, how do I survive nuclear war? How do I survive a major radiological event? And I have been handing out advice as to how to deal with all that. I mean, we probably have not been in as intense a threat of nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was in 1962. I did a video a couple weeks ago with a gentleman who's decades older than me, and he was talking about that, and he's like, well, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis. I said, sir, I'm 34 years old next month. My mom was 5 when that happened. So there's 2.5, almost 3 generations of people that were not alive for that event. So I know you're in your 70s. That was significant for you. We're new here. So pardon us while we catch up with the realities of the situation. But yeah, so that's
We've
kind
been through a
of
lot, but we just haven't been through that. We've been through a
exactly
lot.
a pandemic, financial crisis, and now
You
we can add
know?
nuclear war to the pile. Yes.
Only
So,
Yeah.
I
things
mean,
I know is
that's kind of
cigars and the sandwich. So
Yeah, we're like, might as well just
exactly.
let's add a nuclear war to it. Might as well.
Exactly. So that's kind of where we are with the Ukraine situation. The main takeaway is it could be very easy for this war to expand, and if it does, everybody's going to get some of it. And for the people that think we should go to have a ground war in Ukraine to save Ukrainians, I tell them World War II will look like a pleasant picnic to what will happen with World War III. The weapons are more powerful. Russian weaponry can most definitely reach the United States, which neither the Germans could do in World War II, and the Japanese could only make it to Hawaii. And that was practically a one-way trip. That's not so anymore. Our oceans don't protect us. We have major American cities. You can see our own refugee crisis in this country. We're all going to be living in Iowa. All this type of thing. So, yeah, right now there's talk of like a no-fly zone. Should we invade? Should we not invade? All this type of thing. And the Biden administration is doing great work of addressing the crisis without, one, making it a U.S.-Russia thing. He's letting the Europeans take the lead. Smart. And most importantly, he is really trying to not turn this into a ground war with Russia, because that will be, even if it stays limited to Ukraine, which it won't, even if it stays limited there will be no Ukraine left to conquer. And our missiles are much better than theirs. So, if we're talking about risk to human life, us invading Ukraine to fight against Russia is going to kill more people than it will save. So that's Ukraine in a nutshell.
Right.
and Quagmire's word, Jay, what is your opinion on? We hear a lot of things, and a lot of people aren't as educated as Cam when it comes. I hear some sides saying, "Oh, we need to help our European brothers and sisters, and help and with the weapons and the sanctions aren't enough." And then a lot of people, myself included, is like, "That ain't none of my business. Maybe we should stay over here." What's your opinion on U.S. involvement in this potential World War III situation?
I think that we definitely need to take a chill pill for a second. I know that we always want to be gung ho and like rush in and help, and I think there are ways that we can help. I think obviously we've done the sanctions and things, but I think we just got out of a war and we're trying to put the pieces back together here. And I just think that I think for me, and I think that I've seen is a lot of people have kind of lost a little bit of faith in the administration because of just like promises that to the people. And so I just think that any resources or anything that they take from the pie that's here is just going to be looked at under really like a fine tooth comb, especially because of there's a lot of things where money hasn't been put that needs to be fixed and everything. And so I definitely I think that with all of the European countries coming together, I mean, even Switzerland, like I never thought I'd see the day where like Switzerland would become not neutral. And so I just feel like we have to let them step in and do what they need to do first before we just go in, because there is such a we're coming off of an administration that was kind of completely polar opposite to how like this administration is running things and their relationship with Russia. So I just think that we kind of have to figure that out. I mean, I know that we were trying to figure out how to get gas or other resources as well from like Saudi Arabia or like other countries, and like they're just like not trying to hear it either because we have beef over there. So I just think ultimately, like the Super Bowl, we had all the electric car commercials and like everything. I just think ultimately America needs to figure out a way to kind of get off of our dependencies from other countries in general, just so that way we can rebuild ourselves and just become like a better environment or a country in general for what we have to offer, you know?
Absolutely. Now, Cam, what do you feel is Putin's ultimate goal besides putting Ukraine back into the Soviet Union? Because I personally feel he's trying to get the Soviet Union back together. He would not stop at Ukraine. So what do you feel Putin's ultimate goal is here?
I'm one of the few people who doesn't see this as a wider conflict. Putin is not, he's dumb, but he's not so dumb as to get involved with a war with NATO that he knows he will lose. That's Russia has been complaining about NATO and NATO troops and all this type of thing for a long time, and the reality, especially given what we've observed of the Russian military in Ukraine, if they can't manage to get through Ukraine, we will obliterate them. That's and I tell people, I said, do you really want B-52s carpet bombing Ukraine? You saw what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not cute, folks. That's not fun. I think I don't view it as a wider conflict. I don't see us as being in necessarily a war with Russia. I think you are right. Putin is trying to get the Soviet Union back together as much as he can, and it certainly starts with Ukraine, which again was part of Russia and the Soviet Union for 300 years. I think it starts there. Ukraine inconveniently was one of the few countries he could seize and not confront NATO. Because people are like, well, if he's complaining about a NATO ally on his border, why not seize the Baltics? I said, well, you just answered your own question. Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania are NATO allies. And they joined NATO expressly to prevent war with Russia. And all three of those countries have large Russian-speaking populations who would probably be more in favor of shacking up with the old regime than the Ukrainians are. And so that is expressly why. You attack a NATO state, the United States is going to bomb you into the Stone Ages. So I think he really is just trying to just seize Ukraine. I think he stops there. Because the minute it goes into Poland, World War III begins. I don't think Putin's that dumb.
I definitely, and they always say respect your adversary. So I don't think he's a big dummy. But, and I hate to be a tinfoil hat person, but do you think this conflict could be really used as a political tool to weaken Biden even more for perhaps Trump reunion in 2024? Him and Putin are BFFs. What do you think about that? Either one of you.
Historic. I guess I'll go first on that one. Historically speaking, American presidents who get involved in conflicts tend to get reelected. So if anything, that would backfire. If we got into a real war with Russia, that would guarantee Biden's reelection in 2024. It would not help Trump. It's also important to note that even if this gets out of hand, Trump's popularity among Republican voters is falling rapidly. It's falling faster than the level of the Hennessy at the cookout. And so it appears that even Republicans are not interested in having Trump again in 2024, which is just, being out of power, being an ex-president, all this type of thing. Only one president in U.S. history has ever served 2 terms non-consecutively. And Trump's not that savvy of a political operator. So in fact, he doesn't know anything about politics at all.
Yeah.
It's people around him who know how to use him to get their agendas done. So no, I don't think so. If anything, I think handling this well will likely secure Democrats the White House in 2024. It will actually have the opposite effect. I think Putin thought that Trump had done such a good job of fracturing NATO, fracturing the transatlantic alliance, all this type of thing. He figured that the West would be in too great of disarray to really do anything about Ukraine. And I think Moscow, if you caught them in an honest moment, would be surprised at how solid the alliance has been and how everybody, even Switzerland, as she pointed out, has showed up to this one. And that, I don't think they anticipated that.
Jay, how about you? Do you share my tin foil hat theory, or are you online with Cam?
Yeah, I think it's just all very going to be very interesting overall, just to see how this all plays out and comes together. Because, like I said, it's just everything, nothing I've ever imagined in my lifetime to happen, and everything that I imagine could happen. So it's just going to be very interesting, um, just going forward. But yeah, how about just for me, I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've seen from it is the leadership from him is from the leader. I definitely can't. I'm not going to try to say his name, but I just think like
President Zelensky.
yeah, yeah. I can't.
Volodymyr Zelensky.
There
There
you
you
go.
go.
I think it's very when we talk about like especially coming off of 45, right, and him always saying like "Make America Great" and stuff. I always would think back about just I guess old leaders would go down with the ship, so to say, and like he was kind of the complete opposite of that, especially on January 6th. It was like, all right, rally the troops, and I'm going the opposite direction. And so now you see like this leader that's like, everyone's like, all right, we're going to send you planes and trains and everything to get you out. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere. What are you talking about? He's like, give me more guns. Let's go. And his people are staying with him and
Trump
rocking
would
with
have
him.
armed
Yeah,
and
there's no
defended
way.
the
I don't even
United
think
States. You
Biden
don't think
would.
Trump would have done
Like,
that?
I mean, in all intents and purposes, and I don't even think, it's I mean, I think Biden's like, what, 70, 80, 70s, 80s, something like that.
76, right, Cam? 76.
Right.
Yeah, he's 77. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I can't really get too upset if I was like, he's like, okay, I'm not going to be the first one out there, right? But at the same time, I think it is interesting to see a leader that is like, no, like, all right, cool. If you want to come, that's fine, but I'm not letting you go without a fight. Like, this is my land, you know what I mean? And I just think like that story and that part of it is a reason why a lot of people rally behind, and especially like his citizens like staying. Like I saw a bunch of people that may have left first, but then they came back, or they never left at all. And I just think like that is just powerful, because I think that's what you really want as a nation. You want that when all else fails and stuff hits the fan, like people are going to be like, no, we're going to stand up. But I just think also that comes from having that strong leadership to make you want to fight for that. I don't know, sometimes either in this country or maybe any other one, where you might always get that same result. Like that's why it's very interesting for me to see that kind of play out right now. How about you?
Yeah, I
Your
mean,
takeaway?
it's interesting to me because just his history. The president of Ukraine, he was an actor, and literally he pretty much played an action hero comedy type thing and made himself into the president. So, I mean, we've obviously had reality stars, so no judgment there.
Right.
But it's very interesting to see the unity of the people in the Ukraine who have Soviet family. As Cam said, 300 years, they were a part of the Soviet Empire. So to see people coming from other countries coming back to defend their homeland, it's pretty inspiring. It's something that here in America, we're the country of the bone spurs. When conflict pops up, everybody has asthma or bone spurs. And so it's very inspiring to see a people actually stand for their nation and say, hey, I'm going to go down with this ship, let the women and children go. And every man that can fight, stand up and fight. It's definitely something that I know personally. I don't think I have the stones. If the roles were reversed, I think I'd have been in Canada real quick. Like, hey,
you're not gonna be trying to push a tank. Man, I saw a guy trying to push a tank. Like I was like, bruh, y'all are intense. You guys are ready for it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's just something that riles up in you, and I think you see that in moments of protest or different things. But it's always interesting because it's kind of like, that story, like the mom moving the car with her kid on it. You know what I mean? That like that strength or that chutzpah or whatever it is that just like, oh no, oh no, it's all holds bar. Let's go. Like I said, that's just a big takeaway. Just like that. The citizens, just the policies on refugees. I think that's going to be interesting how that plays out. You know what I mean? Because we've seen it be different, right? And I think it's being called out by all outlets, by media, by everyone, just kind of like the differences on how things have been happening, because we've seen so many influxes of refugees from different places. So seeing this now play out is very interesting. And then just the sanctions too. I think someone said, and I don't know if it's Cam, I would love to hear your input on that because I'm always interested on, I guess, checkers over or chess over checkers, right? And so, like, when you're doing things to people and you're trying to regulate situations, you also have to be mindful about the power plays and who can then end up using that precedent of what you set against you in a way. And someone had said, I don't know where, but they were just mentioning, like, it'd be interesting if one day, like, China put sanctions on America, because that would be very interesting. Like, just if another country could then, now seeing that America or the US or anyone is doing that to Russia, could any other country, do you think that they could ever have the power to do that to us? So I would love to hear your input on that.
Yeah, so the sanction regime tends to definitely come from northern wealthy nations to poorer nations, especially in the global south, over humanitarian issues, all this type of thing. The difficult part with trying to sanction the United States is we are the world's largest economy, and so most nations there are very few nations who can afford to cut themselves off from the United States, especially given that we all are also the global reserve currency of the world. It also means it becomes very difficult for countries to denominate trade as well. Now, there are some examples of this. Cuba, for example, Iran at different moments, Argentina from time to time, North Korea, all this type of thing have oftentimes severed ties, severed normalization, trade ties, all this type of thing. I do definitely see a scenario in the future where China, as their economy is growing and their nation is becoming somewhat wealthier, although the economic success story of China is way oversold, I could definitely see down the road where China might try to get away with that. But here's the reality. A lot of these countries are kind of lone wolves. China doesn't have many allies. China can't, pick up the phone and get 27 nations to do pretty much anything with. It has ambitions of its own. I think if there's any side benefit to this war in Ukraine, it has convinced China that if they went after Taiwan, the whole world would come down on their heads. So it's that's good news if you're Taiwan. I think there's difficulty with that. But I mean, I think potentially down the road, if the global order changes, yeah, that's a possibility. But there would be massive changes in international relations in order for that to occur, and so someone has to become at economic parity with us. And the closest nation is the Chinese, and that's going to be a while. So call me in 20 years. We'll see.
We'll see. Right. Now, we've seen this obviously have an impact economically. It seems like we've been sanctioned with the prices at the pump. And we hear this, Russian oil shut off. So this is why. Do you feel this is a legit, Russia shut off this, or is it just price gouging like the big oil loves to do? And this is their last money grab before people start saying, you know what, I'm going to switch over to electric. I can't deal with this constant. Is this the oil industry? And I know we're jumping around a bit, but do you feel this is the oil industry's last bit money grab? Or do you think this is a thing to stay, that $7 gas is the future?
I think it's the future probably for the next 18 to 24 months. Mostly because, and it's actually not even our oil companies doing the money grabbing, it's the Middle East doing the money grabbing. Saudi Arabia could increase production and suddenly where oil was worth practically nothing. And that's where all their money comes from. So they're trying to make up for basically 2 years of lost revenue. And so for them, $135 a barrel oil is music to their bank accounts' ears. The accountants are cheering, the bookkeepers are popping bottles. It's happy times in Riyadh. And so removing Russian oil and gas from the market is going to force prices higher. Oil is a global market, so everybody feels it. The Europeans, a liter of gas is up to €2, which means a gallon of gas is about $8 in France right now. here in the US, here on the West Coast, we're at our summer prices of like $4.50, $4.60, which means if this continues on, we'll be going over $5, $6. I think that is probably the idea moving forward. I don't think it's necessarily going to encourage people to move to electric, mostly because electric cars are simply too expensive for most average people. That will change as the decade moves on, but that's still the situation as it is at present. And also we have to, and I always remind people, oil is not just gasoline in your car. It's in everything. It is
belly on your face, the whatever you use.
yes, it's plastic. I mean, it's in your electronics, it's in the interior of the car, it's in electronics, it's, food packaging, all this type of thing is all made of plastic, it's all made of oil. Transitioning off of a fossil fuel based economy is something that needs to be incredibly well planned. We have to look at the entire supply chain from top to bottom and systematically begin removing oil products. And that process will not take any less than 10 to 15 years. I think this will definitely probably get some people thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, those who can afford electric cars will probably switch. And I think those companies that can get rid of plastic and other things made from oil that will go up in price will start to look for alternatives. There's, plastic wrapping that's made from cornstarch, there's hemp products, all this type of thing. And the great part about that is a lot of that stuff can be made right here. So when Jay talks about foreign reliance on oil and all this type of thing, a lot of these new alternatives can be made right here in America. Your cornstarch can come from Iowa and Kansas and all those sorts of places. Hemp is grown widely in California, Colorado, all this type of thing. And we're probably going to see a lot of countries re-domesticating industry. If there's any one thing this war will do, is the pandemic shot globalization in the chest. The war in Ukraine just put it on its knees and did a double tap to the back of the head. I think everyone is going to be like, we've got to stop shipping all of our goods halfway around the world to get them here, because global instability is a thing and we need to keep things a little closer to home.
And now probably with shipping and everything, it's not as convenient as it was. Like the money they save off of probably the labor is not saving on the other end of it, So if they brought it locally, it probably would help not only the economies, but also, balance out probably with everything too.
No, that is absolutely true, with container prices being what they are, shipping what they are. And again, circling back to oil, when fuel prices rise, shipping costs increase. So having something sitting on a ship for 21 days to get from China to the US is increasingly not being practical. Higher fuel prices will make that worse. And that will definitely encourage companies to bring stuff back. In the United States, our government is also spending about $150 billion to begin repatriating some manufacturing. Especially in things like semiconductors and whatnot that have always been made in Asia. A lot of that is going to start coming back. Great news for manufacturing jobs. Those factories will not employ it. There definitely is going to be some job opportunities moving forward, which is good because it should hopefully increase wages, which is not really a discussion germane to this topic, but is still an important thing for people's lives. Wages need to move higher. Especially with the inflation we're having and all this type of thing.
Yeah, we're feeling 30 years behind, roughly 30 years behind, just to get where we should be in the wages. So the wage gap, that could be a whole nother episode. So Cam,
wages haven't really moved since 1977. So yeah,
absolutely. So before I let you go, I want your best case scenario, worst case scenario out of this situation that we're having right now.
Well, I'll start with the easy one, which is the worst case scenario, and that's World War III. That's easy. That's not hard. Like, this is when, the scuffle in the corner in the club turns into everybody punching each other, and a weave gets pulled and alcohol gets spilled and everybody's caught a case. Like that's the worst case scenario.
Then Knuckles Buck comes on and it's
Yes.
just
Exactly. All because Zelensky said, "Catch these hands and pull up."
Yes.
And the Ukrainian people are like, "You can take it in blood." Like that's sort of.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, the
sunflower
best,
seeds thing is
Right.
my all-time coldest rank I've ever heard in my life.
Yes.
absolutely.
I gotta use that again in my lifetime. I have to. Like, it's destined.
I'm gonna start walking around with sunflower seeds just for something to pop off. Like, put these in your pocket.
Right? Like, no, I mean it's nuts. So that's easy. That's the worst case scenario. That's kind of where we're at with that. The best case scenario is Putin can't sustain his power base at home. The oligarchs get pissed because the Russian economy is crumbling under their feet, which is the source of their wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And Putin withdraws his troops from Ukraine to get the sanctions lifted and signs a new peace treaty with them, or at the minimum agrees to some sort of ceasefire with a withdrawal. That could lead to Putin falling out of favor and falling out of power, potentially. But that really would be that the sanctions work, the economic withering of Russia is effective, and we at least get the troops out of Ukraine, possibly with regime change in Moscow as an added benefit. That's kind of the best case scenario. The reality will probably be some weird hybrid of something in between. There's talk about potentially sending in UN peacekeepers on a humanitarian mission, but I saw how the French ran that in Kosovo in the 90s and it didn't go well. So that's kind of your banded end of kind of what can happen. The reality probably will be somewhere in the middle.
You feel we already know he has at least $1 million on his head. If another oligarch's $120 million yacht gets seized, what do you feel that it could be potentially even a higher bounty, and we could see some type of internal changeover? Someone takes Putin out, and then they step in, and maybe they're handpicked by or something. I mean,
that's difficult to do. Putin is very isolated. He tends to stay out of Moscow. He tends to stay at his dacha in Sochi. He sees very few people, and he is only surrounded by trusted guards that have been with him for many years. So I think that is difficult, but also never discount the Russian people and their ability to get regime change going. I also think the oligarchs are certainly at play. I think the fact that Putin chooses not to be in Moscow may be to the oligarchs' benefit, because then if someone wants to seize power, they could conceivably walk into the Kremlin and attempt to seize the Russian government. And Putin will be hours by plane away before he even knows it happens. So something like that could certainly happen, but I think things in Russia are going to have to get a lot more worse and a lot more dicey. Let's also not forget, Russia is a nuclear power. If there is regime change in Moscow and it's not managed, DOD will go in and seize Russian nuclear weapons. That puts us into completely uncharted territory that was inconceivable even by Cold War standards. The transition from the Soviet Union to Russia was managed. We knew where the weapons were, and we still lost 100 pounds of nuclear material that we really have no clue where it is in the world. This transition will not be nearly as nice. So regime change in Moscow would be a great idea, but there's some black swan events that could come out of that could make certain parts of the planet unlivable for the next 10,000 years.
Right.
And if Putin gets backed into a corner, he's already put tactical nukes on the border with Ukraine and has threatened to give them to commanders in the field. If he gets stuck in a corner, he has the means on his person and around him to fire nuclear weapons, and we get into a Cold War scenario. And we have missile defense, but how effective it will be kind of remains to be unseen. And I mean, I could go off. I could do 45 minutes on that. I mean, there's, is that a possibility? Yes. Does it come with a lot of difficulties and issues and potential other problems? Also, yes.
Jay,
let's hope Putin just gives up.
Yeah, I mean, it
Right.
sounds like, and you touched on it earlier, it sounds like he really overestimated when you see, like Jay mentioned, tanks getting towed by trailers and guys driving up with you could see the soldiers looking on their phone for MapQuest directions. And people driving up in Volvos like, are you lost? Burn in hell. And they're, drive away. So it doesn't seem like he was as prepared, or maybe he underestimated the Ukraine's defenses in some of those situations. But ultimately, a war of attrition, if he keeps blasting, who knows if there'll be any Ukraine left.
The thing I love is the Russian soldiers on Tinder trying to hook up with Ukrainian girls. That is hilarious. I also love even the local gays are helping.
That should have been the episode.
I know, like, even the local gays are helping. There's Ukrainian gay men who are getting intelligence from Russian soldiers trying to hook up with them on Grindr because it has the location feed away, and they're tracking troop movement based upon Russian soldiers' Grindr profiles. So it's even the local gays have gotten involved. Like, everybody's helping in Ukraine. Like, the girls are kind of like, let me catfish this man so I can find out where he's going next. And the gays are kind of like, oh girl, he's around the corner. Like, and they're like, it's like, we saw a tank go that way. And how do we know? Because he's only a half mile away. They're going that way. Like, this is war of the 21st century, where it's like dating apps are providing valuable military data. Like,
even though Putin would be taken down by TikTok.
Right?
Right? Oh my
the
goodness.
Russian soldiers were doing dances in front of the tank.
Right. Exactly. Tank trend.
Give us your last words, Jay. We'll go around the room. Jay, Kevin, then I'll finish.
You always want peace. You always want everything to go smoothly. I'm in the way of, like, I don't know how you bargain or do peace talks with someone who says you shouldn't be there, or they say that what yours is mine and there's no, So, I mean, I'd love to see that, just there's obviously no more killing and everyone is good. I'm just, like I said, we're living in literal history. And so I'm just going to see how this plays out. And I just hope for the best. And, yeah. No, I'll get some seeds ready, just in case. Send them out to people.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So,
Cam, can we have your final words?
Yes, I have a master's degree in international relations from a top 100 school back east, and this is me swinging my big Eastern education around. And this was one of our top 5 conflicts that we always feared would come. And there's many ways to get out of it cleanly, but I don't think that's going to be the situation. I think Putin gets desperate. I think some things with long-term consequences are going to start to happen. I would tell everyone, I think we're going to get through this. I would, do some preparation now. If you don't have a battery-powered or crank-powered radio in your life, get one. If you don't have a crank or battery-powered flashlight, get one. If you don't have multiple evacuation routes from where you are, bust out the map. If you don't own a paper map, buy one. There's, in any sort of scenario, GPS probably is not going to work, and networks will be overloaded, all this type of thing. To protect against radiation, potassium iodide is going to protect your thyroid. And, if the crisis escalates, don't wait to prepare. This is not like a hurricane. This is not like a tornado. This is not like a snowstorm. This is something where you're going to need to be able to stay in your house for 2 weeks and not need to literally leave the most interior room of your home. potentially. So stay safe, be prepared, be sane. We're going to get through this, and let's hope we can get out of this conflict without glowing in the dark.
Absolutely. And I do like glow sticks, but I do not want to be I always wanted to be an X-Man, but I don't want to be a mutant where, I've been looking for my power for a while now, but, still nothing. So Cam, thank you so much, brother, for coming in and enlightening us and bringing so much depth to this conversation. It's a conversation that we're probably going to have again, because it feels like this is just the beginning. The pandemic, I always told people, that's just a prequel of this horror movie that we have coming in. You think it's bad now, it can get a lot worse, but hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully wiser and cooler heads will prevail and we can get back to the new normal. I don't think we're ever going to get back to what we used to call, circa 2019 normal, but at
good old days.
The good old days, right? So hopefully we'll have some type of new normalcy, something at all. But as always, thank you, Cam, again so much. Please tell the people where they can find you on social media. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, on Twitter at Cameron Cowan. Same thing for Instagram. Facebook, Cameron L. Cowan, because someone took my name. And you can always find all the links and everything at CameronJournal.com. And new content comes out regularly. And we also have my own podcast. There's a podcast version of the Cameron Journal, and all the links are at CameronJournal.com.
Awesome.
So,
thank you, brother. And Jay, please share your social media to all the politics as usual, all the POW fans. Let them know your social media, where they can find you.
Well, as always, I'm your girl Jay, and you can find me on all platforms at We Are Cusp, KUSP. Yeah, like and follow.
Absolutely. And guys, you can find us at Marz Entertainment, the big mothership of this conglomerate, down in the Den, of course, always episodes weekly for the best in entertainment, down in the Den after dark for your stupid sports and guy talk. And of course, please check out the Cameron Journals. It's a fantastic podcast. Politics as Usual Season 2, we're back. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And as always, politics as usual, politics from A to Z. It's your boy Marz. That's Jay. That's Cam down there. Deuces.
Deuces.